Skepticism and secularism ultimately is about the pursuit of cultural change. Don't tell me it's about a string of academic anecdotes about the progress of science. It's not. What do you want if you're an atheism activist, secularist, skeptic? What do you want? You want to live in a society where people do not mutilate the genitals of their newborn babies, male or female, male circumcision, female. You want to live in a world that's not ruled by crass superstition, by belief in impossible things, with all the terrible social and political consequences that then follow from those beliefs, right? So you want cultural change. That's what you want. Now, how are you going to get it? It's sad and strange for me to say, you're never going to get there through the focus of any example of skeptic and secularist movements that I've ever seen in my life right up till 2019. I think they're all fundamentally wrong because they're being fundamentally dishonest about that simplest of questions. What is the positive objective we're in pursuit of? What is it we want? And you find out who we are by looking around the boardroom table and seeing who wants that same objective as soon as you're really being honest about it. The objective of a secular society does not actually rest on science education. It doesn't rest on any high and refined principle of philosophy. What it rests on is demanding new legislation that will drag religion down to the same level of marketing and advertising, and demand truth and fairness and accountability in advertising. I believe that a Christian friar and a Buddhist monk, I believe they should have the freedom to advertise that they perform funeral services. That you can pay them a certain amount of money and they're going to perform a certain kind of theatrical ritual, whatever it is, involving candles, music, mood lighting, and they're going to lower this casket into the ground or incinerate the body. They're going to chant, maybe in Latin, maybe in Greek, maybe they're going to sing songs in English, maybe in Pali, Sanskrit, you name it, to perform a ritual for a certain amount of money, for a certain kind of theatrical and emotional effect. Nobody wants to make illegal. Conversely, to offer someone who is sick and desperate the promise that if they pay money to a religious leader, if they pay so many $1,000s, then a magic ritual can be performed that will cure them. To have a person refuse science-based medicine, to have a person walk out of a hospital and say, no, I don't need treatment for my cancer because I believe in a faith-based treatment solution. They believe in miracles. And in this world, the 21st century, as never before, miracles are bought and paid for. There are receipts, and there are websites advertising them, and there are pamphlets. They're advertised in the newspaper. And in the United States of America, for example, because of the Constitution and the way that Constitution is interpreted and enforced, there's no concept of false advertising in religion. And I think one of the reasons why, atheists and skeptics up to this point haven't wanted to deal with this is that if you create a category for false advertising, you have to reciprocally recognize that there's something that's legitimate advertising, that's in some sense legitimate religion, even if that's just legitimate in the same sense that theater is legitimate. It's a performance art of some kind. Okay? I looked through the websites of the 4 iconic names, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, and Sam Harris, before making this video, to see what they've actually been doing in the last several years. And you know what it was? They kind of reached a crescendo of public interest maybe 10 years ago. And we've now watched that whole movement dissipate and die. And I'm going to tell you why. It dissipated and it died because it wasn't pursuing a positive objective. It was pursuing a purely negative objective. I got an avalanche of email, YouTube messages, Twitter comments from so-called atheist activists, skeptics. When I was proposing positively, hey, I'm going to write a bunch of original children's stories. I'm going to write and illustrate and publish original children's stories that I can perform for my daughter with a storybook and puppets. I'm going to write these stories because I'm dissatisfied living in a world where pretty much all the children's entertainment and stories she has access to are either religious on the one hand or completely meaningless on the other. There's kind of junk made by Disney, which is secular. Disney's a secular corporation. None of their stuff has religious meanings. And then there's the whole world of religion being presented to and forced down children's throats. And I really see a lot of danger and disadvantage, even in a commercialized Christmas, being inculcated into children and their view of the world. And the messages I got back, and these atheists and so-called skeptics, they really are imitating the leaders of that movement over the last 10 years. Their answer was no. They don't have to do anything positive. They don't have to pursue any kind of cultural change. All they need to do is sit back with their sense of smug superiority and laugh. Laugh scornfully at the true believers whom they feel so intellectually superior to. And that's what I see. That's what I see in making a survey of what these guys have gone on to do in the last 10 years. I mean, obviously, it's not perfect, but I don't see anything I would call activism. You know, sharing a funny little anecdote about some new scientific discovery concerning the Mars exploration program, some, snide laughing at some ridiculous thing some creationists in the United States did. Oh, these rednecks. So these is kind of the, elite university-educated class sitting back, preening, enjoying their sense of smug superiority and heaping scorn on the plebs, on the lower classes. And it is especially, the poor and ignorant of the United States of America who become the butt of these jokes, who become the stereotypical true believer. Why? Because that's safe. It's a lot riskier to take on Saudi Arabia, isn't it? It takes guts to actually deal with, say, women's rights in Saudi Arabia. It takes guts to take on even circumcision, male or female. There are other challenges for the future of, secular education, having a secular society. It actually takes some nerve, verve, tenacity, whatever. It's not what Sam Harris is doing. It's not what Daniel Dennett is doing. It's not what Richard Dawkins is doing. Christopher Hitchens is dead while he was alive. It's not what he was doing either. So the leaders, the people who were most highly visible at the pinnacle of this movement, and I would say this more broadly, I know there are many other smaller personalities here on YouTube, including even the Amazing Atheist, they really set this pattern of behavior for this preening, snide, fatuous, self-indulgent, sanctimonious air of what it meant to be a secular activist, a quote-unquote skeptic. And there never was any sense of positive motivation of, wow, we're going up against more than 2,000 years of tradition and ritual and, pious ignorance, all these things. We have this. And you know what? Our challenge is actually very different from the abolition of slavery. Because it's not something that can just be expressed negatively. It's something that people really need to cultivate positively, like a positive appreciation for science. A large part, evidently, of what Richard Dawkins cares about is trying to get people to care about even geological history, natural history in that sense. Most people don't care. They just don't care. How old is planet Earth? Most people don't care. How do we estimate the age of a volcano? Don't care. It's not something people are getting motivated about. That's the kind of thing he's out there, lobbying on. I sympathize to an extent. But the real practical challenge, which is attainable today in the legislature of any Western democracy anywhere in the world, is actually to separate the exploitative, dishonest, and harmful elements of religion from the elements that can be tolerated, and in my opinion, should be tolerated. Not everyone would agree with that. And to take that step forward, I don't think you need to hold the religions of the world to the high standard of the best possible philosophy, or the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, or some kind of optimal or excellent standard. I don't think you have to hold them even to the standard of the modern sciences, of holding up the Bible, a creationist account of the history of the world, and saying, well, can this really be reconciled with what we know about geology and evolution? But let's take seriously what a tremendous challenge it would be, and yet what an easily attainable goal it would be if religion had to have the same disclaimers that today you find on every packet of cigarettes, on every bottle of whiskey. You know, it says, do not drink during pregnancy. Depending on what country you're in, there's some warnings on alcohol, on cigarettes, on all the dangerous things in your kitchen cabinet. And yet the moment something passes into the category of religion, you can cut off a child's penis. You can cut off about 50% of the nerve endings in the male penis through quote-unquote circumcision, male and female genital mutilation. You can get away with the most outlandish, completely medically illegitimate procedures imaginable. You can reach out to someone who's desperate for help, who's desperate to believe, and tell them exactly what they want to hear, which is, don't worry, have faith, you can be healed. Magically, your cancer can be taken away, and there's a price. There's always a price. All of that can be stopped. All of that can be ended within our lifetimes. And yet it's shocking to me that in the last 10 years, and with so many thousands of hours of listening to podcasts and YouTube videos, sometimes reading the publications, the books these guys have published too, seeing this movement rise and fall, the international conferences. This is my modest proposal, guys. I have never once heard this proposed before.